Our next speaker is Kelly Mroz, and I have the absolute pleasure of introducing her. She's a wonderful lady, and you'll hear more from her.
I'm Kelly Mroz. I'm the Director of Student Legal Services at Penn State, and I'm going to be talking about the Model Lease Project, how it came about, and what I think it adds to the community. Hi. I'd like you all to take a minute and imagine something. Imagine a place where you have tens of thousands of first-time renters. These folks are fairly new to the business of living independently and all the freedoms and responsibilities that come with that. And imagine that there's more demand than supply for housing in the most desirable areas. Now you can imagine that those landlords might start to feel like those young tenants are damaging their property or not understanding their obligations under the lease. And those tenants might start to feel like the landlords are taking advantage of the housing shortage and making unreasonable demands or not treating them respectfully. Imagination? Or does this all sound a little familiar? When I took on the role of Director of Student Legal Services about 3 years ago, I was asked to create a model lease. And the idea was that I would draft up a lease that had terms that were fair to everyone and that landlords would use it. My reaction? Chicken, right? How am I going to get landlords to do anything? I had seen photos from landlords of a house that had been used as a party spot and all of the destruction that had occurred. I had talked to tenants who reported that their landlord would sneak into their apartment when they weren't there and rifle through their belongings. But I knew that most of the tenants I talked to were responsible, thoughtful renters. And most of the landlords I knew were hardworking, good business people. And it probably only takes a few party houses and a couple unethical landlords before this starts to feel like a bad place for renting. And so I agreed to take on the project. And the first thing that I did was looked around the country at what was a model lease, how were people doing this, what was the purpose, and how was it being accomplished. And I found that there is a wide spectrum for what a model lease can be. First, you have this sort of neutral lease. Someone just writes it and puts it up there. For example, the lease that Penn State Altoona's off-campus living has on their website. Then there's one that's more educational. For example, Maine's Attorney General has drafted a model lease and an extensive guidebook to go with it, explaining all the terms in the lease and all the law on landlord-tenant relations in Maine. And then there's advocacy. So in the city of Evanston, Illinois, the city has developed a model lease that it encourages landlords to use. And then there's reform. The best example of reform is in Davis, California, where in the 1970s, a community group got together and they drafted up a lease with terms that were very favorable to tenants. But they created this collaboration and got everyone on board. And in its heyday, 90% of landlords in Davis, California used the Davis model lease. Now, as we got thinking about this project, there were lots of people who were excited about the idea of a model lease. It's student leaders, Penn State administrators, borough officials. But you can see, if I wanted to do something more than just plop a lease on my website, there's an important group missing here. And in State College, we don't just have a few individuals or organizations or entities that make up our landlords. We have small landlords, large landlords, local landlords, out-of-town landlords, corporate landlords, mom and pop landlords, lot of landlords. And so to get started on this project, we brought a lot of stakeholders together, a lot of people from these different groups, and had a community meeting. And at that meeting, we tried to look at the issue strategically. And so we looked at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we looked at that spectrum of options that was available for what a model lease could be. And we found, and we found the landlords, some of them were cautiously optimistic about the idea, some were skeptical, and some were not excited about the project. And as we talked, the positions and the ideas, the tenants and the landlords, they felt that what their concerns were very separate and different. And so landlords were saying that tenants didn't understand the binding nature of a lease, or they had trouble with borough points where the tenants had garbage or noise violations, but it attached to the property. And the tenants were saying, well, the signing dates are so early, and we're having trouble getting security deposits back, and we can't get out of a lease when we really need to. But as the discussions continued, commonalities started to emerge. Landlords want tenants to understand the rights and obligations of their lease. Tenants want to understand the rights and obligations of their lease. Landlords want the tenants in their buildings to all enjoy living there. Tenants want to enjoy living in their building, and they don't want to run afoul of other tenants or the surrounding community. And so we took from this larger group, we formed a small working group, having all the stakeholders at the table to try to move things forward. And from this information, we concluded that education was the key common theme that kept emerging. In fact, we discussed the fact that if you had a model lease, even the best model lease, but no education to go with it, none of the concerns that had been raised were really going to be addressed. But if you just did education, even if you didn't have a model lease to go along with it, you still were going to be touching on some of the problems that we were seeing. And so this is the result. After a semester of meetings, we developed the Lions Lease website. This is a resource that includes information, contact information, and an annotated sample lease. So you can go on this website, and you can hover over a term in the lease and get a more detailed explanation of what that means. You can watch a video where landlords and tenants talk about how to get your security deposit back. And you can find the telephone number of who to call if your landlord won't fix your toilet. Now, this website is not going to change the world. It's not even going to address all of the questions and issues that landlords raised. It's not going to address all of the issues that tenants raised. What was different, what is innovative about this project is that it helped people who felt that their issues were very different find those commonalities and build upon that to affect change. And so what I hope that we all leave here with today is the idea that the model lease project, lionslease.com, is not finished. This is just a start. It's a start in pushing the needle a little bit on that spectrum of options that we have available to us. It's a start in bringing people together to have conversations, to find common ground, and build upon that to solve seemingly intractable conflict. Thank you.